Hello, it's Bleak Code, and this video is going to be talking about what is Apollo Federation. But before we get there, some context is necessary. So how did we get there, right? Or rather, I wanted to add some pre-knowledge, so you're comfortable with what I'm talking about. Maybe you're a really beginner, or maybe you're more senior in this topic, right? But I want us to be on the same page. So essentially, before we get there, or even I wanted to start off with actually talking about what is GraphQL, but before even we get there, what is REST? Let me just make this bigger. Okay, so what is REST, right? REST is one of the most popular way to communicate between one app to another, or app to service, right? Or front end app to service. Now, I'm sure you have a basic idea of how it works. You have like a HTTP GET request, to some example API.com, example-api.com, and you're fetching products, right? You're fetching product and some ID, right? So now this is traditional REST API, and this will return some product information, so it will be like name, price, and then some weight of the product, etc. And you might even have a reviews section, like an array of reviews or something, right? Now, this is how we go about things in REST API, and this would be essentially just like one big query, maybe doing a join or subquery, whatever. But maybe you don't want to always fetch this in this query, right? Maybe getting reviews on its own is pretty complicated. Maybe it's just not simple as fetching from the single point of repository, right? Maybe it's complicated stuff, right? So you might be thinking, why not just make another query, to get reviews on product, maybe get reviews on product, something like this, right? And split up the query, so you have now two queries. Now you have two queries, two separate queries, two extra calls. So you could do that, right? But now it's just like extra work and unnecessary stuff, and it's just a bit cumbersome, And sometimes you want to fetch the entire reviews section in the one query, to save time, right? So now you have duplicated stuff, right? You will have duplicated code. It's just not needed, right? So this is where GraphQL shines the most. It's like you can decide what to show and what not to show, all in just one big query, right? And so, for example, you would have a query section, and you can fetch product. You can fetch a product by some ID, some ID, and then you would do the same, same price and weight. Now you have reviews section, right? This reviews property. Now the thing with the GraphQL where it shines is that you can implement it in a way that it can render, you can fetch all that stuff in just one big join query, or you can have its own resolver, or own way of fetching this stuff. It doesn't have to be from the same data, but it could be from wherever. And this would review ID and other stuff, and title right there, description, or rating rather, right? So this maybe takes extra few seconds or extra few milliseconds to load. Maybe this is a bit time consuming, so you can choose to display it, maybe you not choose to display it, depending on the page you're at, so you could save time, and you save time in writing code as well. You don't have to create another endpoint, making sure that's working, and it can get really complicated, so it just saves you extra time. I think this is where the benefits of GraphQL is, right? And you can also, well, with this it would just be just an extra request, it won't be just extra, it will just essentially be just one big request. So first of all, you're saving network requests, but it will just be 2 database queries essentially. That's what it is, right? Now that we have some idea of GraphQL, there's other stuff too. This is just for fetching data. There's also for to add data, to update the data, delete data, whatever. You can use thing called mutations. So you would do add product. You would do some action like that, or delete product. Some product action like that. And so on. And there's also subscription. Can't even spell subscription. So there's also subscription. It's just basically lets you do real-time communication between the client and the service. You can use WebSockets, you can do HTTP callbacks, whatever. But this is a nice feature of GraphQL as well. You don't have to implement your own WebSocket service. You can all be in like just one service. So this is nice, right? Now that we have a basic understanding of GraphQL, what is the limitation with a single graph, right? Or I guess this can be also applied to what are some limitations with a single service, right? With any single service, when your team becomes more, it has grown, maybe your product has become more mature, where you need to make sure certain parts of the app are always running, not always have to redeploy a huge chunk of artifact. Sometimes that could take time. Maybe there could be some errors that can cause extra friction, which you might not need, right? So you would think about maybe making a microservice depending on the concern that you want to separate. Like for example here, it's just a tiny example. Maybe you want to have like products and reviews separated in its own service, right? Just an idea. This is very simple, but like I would not split it up in just reviews and product. But yeah, anyways. So now, this is where you want to split up a big graph with the one big graph into multiple subgraphs and one super graph, right? So this is what Apollo Federation is. It lets you do that very synchronously, or rather, it's very synergy. So you would have, say, a service, product service, or rather, we don't use service, we use subgraph terminology, and then we will have a review subgraph, right? And then big supergraph, right? And essentially, what supergraph is responsible for is only supposed to route requests to either product or to review. Oops, it changed the language to Groovy. Let me change it back to text. So it will route the request to either product or review or other subgraph you have defined. Essentially, what it's doing is just trying to find that entity or query or mutation that you want to route to, and that's what it is. Maybe even product section, maybe review section rather, is relying on product, and maybe another subgraph is also relying on product. It does this very synchronously. It's very, very beautiful setup. You don't have to take care of manually having to call another service to take to request data. I think this can be cumbersome and time consuming, right? And so that kind of stuff is extracted into a black box in a supergraph, right? So that's just what Apollo Federation is in a nutshell. So let's just give some an idea. So product subgraph will have some product entity, it will have, product entity. You can fetch the product, and then same with the subgraph. It will have a review entity, and then the review entity, it can also extend product entity from product subgraph. But the cool thing about this is that extends. You can have like product properties here, and then you can also have review properties, properties here. So the thing is, I don't own this review, the products entity in the review subgraph. Only product does, and it takes care of it very beautifully. You don't have to worry about making a request to product subgraph to fetch the items yourself. You just have to pass in the right ID here, like for the product, and it will take care, the product subgraph will take care of this magic, essentially, right? So now we're getting somewhere, right? Now we have an idea. Whatever did I write? Yeah, now that we have an idea of how Apollo Federation works, and it solves a certain problem. Let's take a look at the code, right? This would really be helpful. Maybe it will give you an idea, right? So before we get into anything, I have set up this repo. You can take a look at yourself. You can fork it yourself. You can use it, play around with it, whatever you want to do with it, It's Apollo Federation 1, and let's get into it, right? So you have the product subgraph. I split the big graph on its own graph, and what I'm doing here, essentially, I'm not using the schema first approach. I'm using the JavaScript, code first approach. Using it's using its GraphQL library from Apollo Server. And I create an entity, I create an entity, and I add this annotation. This is very important with Apollo Federation, right? It's essentially saying that, hey, this is a unique entity, right? And you're saying that it lives here, and it can also be referenced with fields UPC. This is essentially ID, but it's like a unique type of ID name, you could say. But everything else is pretty similar to a single schema or a single graph that you would have set up, right? It's just Apollo Federation stuff, and you just serve it, right? Well, anyways, so that's one thing. And then another key thing to note is that when you want to resolve product, this entity, any references resolvers this is a very important type of method you want to override, essentially. So essentially, any subgraphs or any other graphs want to reference it. All you do is pass an object. So it will pass in some input, and then you just need to pass an ID, this UPC ID, to basically find the products from this data. I made just like a small data store. It's very bare bones, and you just want to be filter. For example, you filter by this UPC value, and it will get you that object, And now reviews, where I make the reference to product, it does not have to, implement this. It does not have to call this. It does not have to call this manually using HTTP requests and whatnot, right? It would automatically resolve, and it's just you need to do build federated schema and Apollo server, very similar setup to a single graph, And then let's look into review subgraph. This is just how just the queries for the product service is set up as well. And then let's look at the review service, right? So you have the review service, you have the type review, and now review. Do you notice I don't use key here because it's not being it's not going to be referenced any elsewhere, like if you wanted to be able to reference reviews in some other subgraph, you have to write key, and the field that you want to resolve it by, right? But look at this right here. You know, you have this product being referenced, but look, I don't have any, you know, reference except for this part right here, where I extend onto that product type and essentially add more properties to it. Because reviews store is owned by, you know, reviews subgraph, it can add on to it, you know. And all I did was, you know, extend the type and note that UPC value is external, but I still want to include it here for resolving, and then also just add this review type on the array on here. And there's a query for reviews on its own. Product doesn't own this, review service owns this. And then here on the product property on the review, for it to resolve, all you're doing is just passing the parent ID, the product ID. Where is it? Let's go to data here. So in this, you will see that it would just take the product, it's just ID, and then it would just resolve on its own. Like, very beautiful, very simple, you know. And for reviews, it would just, you know, resolve like this, you know, review.product, if it equals the product UPC, reviews filter. It's a very simple query, you know, but it does not essentially, like on the product query itself, it would resolve on its own. Like, it does not, like, it doesn't always have to run an this in the same query, you know. So only when you need to reviews it will resolve, right? And that's pretty much similar setup for the product subgraph, you know. Build federation schema, follow server, and then host it, right? Now let's finally look at the super graph, right? You have now the thing this is responsible for, the service, is only able to work as a proxy, you know, to it's like a router essentially, you know. A client makes a request to this router and it will just figure out where the request goes, like, you know, does it go to product or reviews, and then even within the subgraph, the request, where does it need to resolve to, you know. That's all it's doing, and just host it, you know. Very simple. So now that we have an idea, let's run this, you know, to get like a visual example, you know. This is always the fun part. So let's see. Oh, why it's not running? Huh. Oh, I have to actually, do I have to run it? Do you have to install it? Let me see. I think I have to install it. Yeah, forgot to mention this. So I have to go to product subgraph, install it for that, and then for review subgraph I have to go into install dependencies for that. Then do the same for supergraph, and then you come back down and then just run node start JS. So boom. So now you notice this is where the supergraph is hosted, and this is the product service, and this is the review service, right? Oops, I don't want to run it on that. I want to run it on this guy. Host 4000. Ooh, what happened here? Oh, I made an oopsie. There we go. Huh. There we go. Okay. So let's open this up. Let's refresh. What's happening here? Something is not right. Oh, Brave does not. It does not work in Brave. No. Okay, anyways, we'll go to Firefox. Okay, so look how quick it was. I went to the supergraph and it got me the product query from the product subgraph, and it got me reviews query or reviews, resolver from reviews subgraph, And let's do product fetch or something. I don't know. And then do product. Let's let me make this bigger. I wonder if I can. UPC, and then name, price, and then let's fetch this. Let's see if this works actually. Oh, it works. Okay, so let's do another UPC. This works, and so forth, and yeah. Now look at this beauty, right? Like, because I extended the type products in the review service, I could do this, right? I can add on to this from a different service. Like, even though product is not responsible for this, I can do. I forget what it is. Oh, did I do this wrong? Reviews, the author body. There we go. Boom. So you have reviews loading as well, and if you don't need it, you can comment it out. You don't need to run it. It will save some time running the query as well, right? And you can also run the query on its own, right? Because this was a query I defined in the review subgraph as well. So very beautiful, right? Very beautiful. So this is what Apollo Federation is essentially, and I want to show you. Another last thing I would like to mention is, a lot of these videos don't have, there's not a community essentially for Apollo Federation, and I would like to, mention some research that I did. So some of the research I did was, looking up like possible ways to deploy. One of the two ways I saw was GraphQL OS, and then GraphQL. Sorry, not GraphQL, GraphQL Hive, and then what is it? Let me show you. Hive, GraphQL Hive. So it does schema registry. So you just deploy your schema on there rather than your code manually. You just do that, and then you can deploy that. But for me, it was not a pleasant experience because you're manually porting over the schema and like taking care of that, and it can be like very cumbersome, Another approach was on AWS. I was looking at different services essentially, and I noticed that there's EC2 option, like you can have your own VM running and do all the DevOps setup. You could do that. It's a bit time consuming, maybe even hard to maintain. You would have to set up your own safety nets to make sure nothing breaks on its own, and if it does, you take care of it automatically rather than you having to go in and doing it yourself. The other option was Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk works, but it's not the best experience. Like you still have to find a way to not get into errors related to Apollo Studio with the URL. You have to set up some like routing configuration, and it was a bit cumbersome. So another option that I will mention before the final option that I took with, there's also ECS. You could go with the ECS route, define your own containers, your own scaling groups, and for each service can have like multiple containers being ran. If one container breaks, open another one, and then so forth. And then like the quicker version that I went with was the app runner. So yeah. Actually, before we get into this, there's also AppSync, which is kind of like the Apollo Hive, or sorry, not Apollo Hive, GraphQL Hive, the Guild Hive, and it lets you also register schemas and have a federated graph. But it's it's very time consuming, and it might not be for you. Like it might be just for like a small project for me at least. And then this one, the beauty of this is it's kind of like Elastic Beanstalk, but so you define a service. You can use your own container image. Set up your, or you can link it to your GitHub, and so you can go to federated graph. Let me see federated graph example. So you go here. You can pick up. You can pick this folder, for example, and then do where you go, and then go like this, and then you could just deploy it, and that's what I did for both of the subgraphs, review, product. And then for the supergraph, finally, one thing to note is in the configuration all the way to the bottom, or not at the bottom, right here. So I added some environment variables, the product subgraph and review subgraph, and then pointing them to whatever the links are for those services in the app runner. For example, right here, so product service would use this link, and review service would use that link. And simple as that. You go into supergraph, you click on it, and the beauty of it is like, okay, so it's just using like it's using like a Docker image. You don't need to worry about like setting it up yourself. You can look at the activity metrics, monitor the metrics, like how many requests came in. Like I didn't have to set that up with EC2, so it's simple. There's also observability. You can turn on complex observability and custom domains, all from one setup, right? Similar to Heroku, but yeah, very simple. Okay, so let me copy this link actually. Okay, so this is my production link, and let's see. It's like it's set up like how we set it up locally, and you can do that. Ooh, all right. For example, which product? Oh, I don't have a review ID. Okay, so you're able to fetch the product, the reviews, and whatnot, and you can also fetch reviews on its own, you can do that as well, all one network request. So hope you like this video. It's a very simple setup, and it's a bit cheaper side, compared to ECS, but it's still limited, so if you want like more control over like the scaling side and more configuration, I would go with the ECS route or EKS for the Kubernetes route. So yeah, hopefully you like this video. If you have any questions regarding Apollo Federation, please share them in the comments. I will keep an eye for them. If you have any new questions you want to ask me about programming or software engineering, just message me on the comment section. I'll get to it soon. Hopefully you liked the video. Bye.